In this presentation, we'll address recommendations from the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee, a government industry group that analyzes general aviation accidents and incidents. Recently, the committee studied system and component failure accidents, and they determined that a significant number of fatal accidents result from unsuccessful forced landing attempts. The committee feels that improved pilot knowledge of and proficiency in flying at best glide speed and configuration will increase the chances of a successful forced landing. So what is best glide speed anyway? Is it the speed that will get you the greatest distance, or the speed that will get you the longest time in the air? Or are they the same thing? The longer you fly, the further you go. Well, as so often is the case, best glide speed depends on what you're trying to do. Let's look at some alternatives. If distance is what you want, you'll need a speed and configuration that will get you the most distance forward for each increment of altitude lost. This speed is often referred to as best glide speed, and on most airplanes, it'll be roughly halfway between Vx and Vy. The speed will increase with weight, so most manufacturers will establish the best glide speed at gross weight for the aircraft. That means your best glide speed will be a little lower for lower aircraft weights. Not all manufacturers publish a best glide speed, but here's a chart with examples from some who do. Maybe you're not as concerned with how far you'll glide. You might want to stay in the air as long as possible to either fix the problem or to communicate your intentions and prepare for a forced landing. In this case, you'd want to know the minimum sink speed. This speed is rarely found in POHs, but it'll be a little slower than maximum range speed. If you're wondering about the airplane you fly, you can do some experiments on a dual flight with your CFI. Start at VY or manufacturer's recommended best glide speed with power off. You did remember the carb heat, didn't you? And note your speed versus sink rate as you adjust pitch to reduce airspeed. For the most useful results, you should do this as close to typical mission weight as possible. Remember, optimal glide speeds will be slower as aircraft weight decreases. It will be easy to identify minimum sink speed. It's the speed to fly for the lowest rate of descent. Maximum glide range speed will be a little higher than minimum sink. Here you're looking for the highest speed forward for the lowest rate of descent. Once you've identified minimum sink and maximum range glide speeds, you've got a couple of good numbers to use for the future. The next big challenges are to know your height above the terrain and to glide the airplane to a point from which you can make a successful forced landing. Power-off approaches and landings are the best way to train for the main event. How many miles you can glide per 1,000 feet of altitude is a very useful thing to know. A rule of thumb for Cessna 152s and 172s is 1.5 nautical miles per 1,000 feet of altitude above ground level. Remember, this is altitude above ground level, not sea level. Experiment to see how far you can glide in your own airplane. Frequent forced landing practice at typical mission weights is an excellent way to maintain proficiency and peace of mind. Forced landing skills diminish rapidly over time, but with practice, you'll be able to consistently land on your chosen touchdown spot regardless of the wind. Some pilots choose a spot between the first and second third of the available landing area for an initial aim point. As they see they can make the initial spot, they'll add flaps and perhaps slip the airplane to move the aiming spot to the first third of the landing runway. This is done to reduce the chance of landing short or a final approach stall while trying to stretch the glide to the runway. Even if the landing is so long it results in an overrun, it's usually better to land long and leave the runway at a slower speed than to stall or land short of the runway. Altitude estimation and speed control are very important when gliding close to the ground. The 90-degree power-off approach is seen here. Note that in this and all other gliding approaches, we want to reach a key position on base from which we know we can make a successful landing. Until the key position is reached, we'll keep the airplane configured for best glide. After we pass the key position, we'll add flaps and gear to configure the airplane for landing and fly the final approach at 1.3 times the stalling speed in landing configuration. In the 180-degree power-off approach, the throttle is closed on downwind to beam the intended touchdown point. As in the 90-degree power-off approach, we'll fly at best glide speed and configuration until we reach the key position. After that, we'll configure the airplane for landing. The 360-degree overhead approach calls for even more judgment and skill. Here, we close the throttle while over or slightly adjacent to the intended landing point and glide a complete, albeit shorter pattern to a landing. This maneuver is usually started at 2,000 feet over the runway. As with a 180-degree approach, there are two key positions. The first is to beam the selected touchdown point. The second is on base when in position to land. Finally, we have the overhead spiral approach. This technique is used to descend from cruise altitude over a selected forced landing area or runway. Best glide speed and configuration should be maintained until the base leg key point is reached, where the airplane is configured for landing at 1.3 VSO. If you want to learn more, check out the Airplane Flying Handbook. It's available at the web address shown. Want to learn even more? Participate in the Fast WINGS Proficiency Program. It's a great way to get expert coaching that will keep you at the top of your flying game. If you have any questions, you can post them as a comment on the YouTube channel, or you can also come to our Facebook page, Maine Flying.